Hi everyone, welcome to THT, and today we're going to talk about the 10 cards that I wish were better. So for today we're doing something a little bit different. I'm going to remove my player hat, and instead I'm going to take my designer hat because I also happen to be a game designer myself, and I'm going to be looking at Star Wars Unlimited from a design standpoint and talking about the 10 cards that I wish were better. So I understand that in the trading card games, not every card needs to be competitively playable. There's going to be cards that are meant for limited play. There are cards that are going to be meant for Twin Suns. There are going to be cards that are going to be for casual, and that's completely fine. With that being said, there's a couple of cards that I'm pretty sure that those cards were meant to be constructed playable, or at least powerful tools. And I feel like the fact that they're not, the feel like those cards are too weak, is harming the meta. It makes the game worse than what it could be. And I feel like if those cards were stronger, they would produce a more diverse meta game than what we have now. So don't get me wrong, I think the meta is in a pretty decent place at the moment, but it's always interesting and fun to think about what it could have been if some of the cards in the set were a little bit better. So in this case, I'm going to talk about the cards, and I'm also going to talk about in which way those cards could be changed in order to be a little bit stronger. So we're going to start first with the number 10, which is Vanguard Infantry. So might be very surprised that I'm talking about this card, but I think it's one of those cards which could have helped a lot two specific archetypes. I think one of the first archetype is Palpatine. Palpatine, unfortunately, his ability is very situational and not very useful at the moment because there's just not that many units that produce very powerful effect when they get defeated. And I think Vanguard Infantry could have been one of those units that would have been a huge upside for the Grand Inquisitor to be used in order to really get significant value out of his ability. So, for example, maybe he should have given 2 experience instead of 1 experience when he dies, and suddenly being able to kill him right away as he comes into play would have been a lot more beneficial, would have made it a worthwhile inclusion. He's also a trooper. As you know, there's also like kind of a trooper sub-theme in the game. I think it would have been cool to have more competitive troopers to make the trooper archetype a little bit better. My second pick is Bombing Run, and some people might be very surprised to see this card in the list because Bombing Run is already a pretty strong card. It's a card that does see competitive play, and you're going to see this card typically in control red decks, notably Aiden, and I also play it in my version of Vader, so it's not a bad card by any means. But I feel like it would have been beneficial for the game if this card was a little bit better, and I'm going to try to explain myself. Pretty much one of the big problems at the moment is like it's very difficult to play control without playing black-green because overwhelming barrage is so powerful is one of the reasons for that. But I think that there would have been space for other control deck to exist if Bombing Run was better. The problem is like Bombing Run, even though it is a decent card, it is nowhere near close the power level of a card like Overwhelming Barrage, and I feel like having Bombing Run been slightly better would have helped in producing a more diverse amount of different control decks that you would be able to play. And it would not have been as mandatory and it would have made control decks a little bit less dependent on Overwhelming Barrage if Bombing Run was a little bit better. So what I mean by a little bit better, maybe make it so it deals 4 damage instead of 3, or maybe make it so you can choose whether it deals ground space, but also could say all ground and space in some situation. That kind of thing. So maybe this is too powerful. I'm not saying that my suggestions are good. Obviously, those would need to be heavily tested, but my simple statement is that I think this card, I think the meta game would have been better off if the Bombing Run would have been slightly better. My next pick is I had no choice. So currently there is a leader that is very dependent on that is currently kind of want to be a control leader in the cunning villainy colors, And unfortunately, this leader is not very competitive right now because Cunning Villainy is a horrible color for control decks. And that leader is obviously Thrawn. I think Thrawn would be so much better if we had real control tools in Cunning Villainy. And I think that I Had No Choice is one of those cards which I wish was better because this would have a lot of would be very beneficial for the meta. It would basically make Thrawn better because it would basically be a new tool for Thrawn to be better. It would also be so a new late game tool, like a new incentive to play like Cunning Villainy in a more control way. And it would also help Jabba the Hutt because Jabba the Hutt would be able to search for I Had No Choice. So any buff to the trick is an indirect buff to Jabba the Hutt, which I think would have been positive as well. Some people might say, well, they would make Boba even stronger than what it is now, but you could make this argument about buffing any Cunning Villainy card at this point, and I think that if I was going to make the changes to make those cards better, I would also make, on the other hand, some changes to make some other cards a little bit worse, so to balance things out. But this is not the topic of this video. But basically, I Had No Choice. I think the game would be better off if this card was a little bit better. How could they make this card better? Maybe make it so you get to choose instead of your opponent get to choose. So it basically becomes sort of a vanquish combined with a waylay. That would be very powerful. But it would still be situational because you still need two non-leader units to be in play. That's not always the case, and the card is pretty expensive. So I don't think this would be too overpowered. Um, so moving on to the next card is Guardian of the Wild. So right now, Force deck, they are okay, they are playable. You got Grand Inquisitor, which is not too bad, and then you got Chirrut, which is not completely terrible. Those decks are good, but I think those decks would just be slightly better and more playable if Guardian of the Wild was better, because suddenly you got a Force Enabler much earlier in the game. You get more Force Enabler in your deck, and those are Force Enablers happens earlier in the game. And then suddenly, of course, upgrades also becomes a little bit better as well, so you can play Fallen Lightsaber and Jedi's Lightsaber a little bit better as well. I think it's all good. The problem with Guardian of the Wild is like it's way too fragile. It's a 2/2 for 2, gets killed by almost anything in the game, and almost never really a relevant body. I think this card should have been a 2/3, and this would have made the Force archetypes a little bit better out of the first set, which I think would have had a positive impact on the game. My next one is Hera Syndulla. So Hera Syndulla is carrying on her back the entire Spectre archetypes, basically until we get to better Spectre payoff. She is really the main thing that is incentivize you to build the Spectre deck. And unfortunately, she's an enabler, but unfortunately the problem is that we do have enabler to play all those Spectres together thanks to Hera, but we don't have any payoff. We don't have any real reason to be running all those Spectres together. There's no really any reward for doing that. And I feel like Hera should have been the reward. She should have been the enabler and the reward as well. Maybe make it so when she deploys, she has a much more spectacular effect related to having Spectres and related to Spectres. And this would have made the deck makes a lot more sense. So obviously, Hera, she's still playable, I guess, if you want to play casual and stuff. But it would have been so much more fun for a lot of people, I'm sure, if she was a bit more playable than what she is now. And I'm afraid that it's going to take a very long time for her to get the tools that she needs to become competitive. It might even never happen. So it would have been, in my opinion, the leaders should be designed to work within the sets they belong to. Obviously, some leader will get worse, some leader will get better over time. That's okay. But I feel like every leader out of the first set should be at least playable, and unfortunately, she's really missing something to become the leader she could be. So this is a big disappointment, and I think Hera really needed to be a little bit better than that. Next, we got Cassian Andor. So kind of the same idea as for Hera. He's kind of missing something. The problem is like he wants you to deal damage, but also wants to draw card. Aggro doesn't really need to draw cards. I think drawing cards overall has been a little bit overestimated by the design team. They were very, very cautious with draw effect out of the first set, which is understandable. But the result is that almost any effect that allows you to draw a card is kind of useless in this game. And Cassian Andor is probably the most famous example for this. An entire leader that maybe his ability should have been free, or maybe this ability should have been that you deal damage to anything, not the base, so then he has a bit more of a control vibe to it, which I think would have made more sense for the leader. And it would have been also cool to have a control-ish leader in those color combinations, and it would have been a bit more interesting. Rather than Cassian Andor is just a bad aggro leader. He wants to be aggro, but he does not compete with the other aggro leader like Sabine or Leia. Next is obviously the infamous IG-88. So IG-88 was supposed to be the aggressive leader on the villainy side, and unfortunately he fails very epically at this. Where do we start? He has the stats are just too weak. The ability is too easy to counter, too difficult to play around, and the fact that IG-88 is bad is very bad for the game, because I feel like playing aggro villainy is not really viable. I think the only way you can make aggro villainy viable is by playing Boba, and even that is not the best version of Boba. So I feel like IG-88 should have been that aggressive villainy leader that would have made villainy aggro kind of a thing. And it's a little bit disappointing that it's not the case, because it's simply just extremely underwhelming. So what would have been needed to make him more powerful? I think making his ability less situational by making it so if you have as many units as your opponent, you can use his ability, for example, and maybe change his stats for him to be a 5/5 or even like a 4/6 instead of a 5/4. Would have gone a long way into making him a bit more playable, so he can stick on the battlefields a little bit better. Next, General Tagge. So General Tagge is currently in the set the only payoff, the real payoff for playing a lot of troopers, so kind of the swarm strategy with troopers, which would have made also Gram of Tarkin a lot more viable than kind of the trooper Gram of Tarkin deck. Unfortunately, this deck does not work, and one of the big reasons why it doesn't work is because General Tagge is just bad. Very difficult to get 3 troopers on the battlefield. Even with 2 troopers, very difficult, and if there's only 1 trooper on board, then Tagge is just a 2/2 for 2 that gives an experience. Absolutely not worth it, and that's very unfortunate. I feel like it would have been nice to have some sort of swarm strategy with command villainy. I think that would have been very fun. So I think for General Tagge should have been significantly better. Maybe make it so his ability is I don't know, could be like an exhaust ability where you can exhaust him and give some trooper some experience token every turn or whatever. Like there's a lot of ways it could have been changed, but or maybe giving like much better stats. There's a lot of ways it could have been a lot better, but they've decided to make him pretty bad, and that's a bit unfortunate. And I don't even think that this unit will be good whenever they decide to incorporate more troopers, because the metagame is going to change, the decks are going to become more powerful, and Tagge just is way too situational. Next, it's not one card, it's basically all the bad, very specialized double aspect card in the game. So Protector is not bad, but it is very situational. The other 3 are just simply bad. I have a problem with card being specialized, situational, and double aspect. I think that a card that is double aspect should not be specialized, because this is the card that you're going to be playing in your double aspect. It's supposed to be a reward for playing double aspect. And playing double aspect is already specializing yourself a lot. And so if you have cards that are further specialized in a double aspect deck, the odds that those cards will ever see plays are very low. So that's the problem with Protector. And then the problem with the other 3 cards is that they're simply just not very strong. And this is a big bummer that those cards are weak, because it basically removes entire archetypes. The only reason why double cunning is the best deck, Of course, there's Boba and all that shenanigan that helps, but the real problem with double cunning is that all the double aspect cunning cards are very strong, and that's not the case with the double aspect red or green or blue, especially green. So this really is a bummer because it means that those different color combinations currently not playable, and I feel like this could have been avoided simply by making those cards stronger and especially less specialized. So I think it's a very big missed opportunity here to make those aspect combinations competitively viable. Next one is probably my number one. It is the Camara. So I talked about earlier about the fact that Thrawn really needed like some strong late game cards to shine. The problem is if you're playing Thrawn, you don't have access to all those powerful late game cards that you have access to when you're playing specifically blue, green, black. While here you either have to choose between the blue, so the Super Laser Blast and the Avenger, or you have to choose to get like the Devastator and the Reinforcement Walkers. You can't get like both of those things, and this is really hurting the deck because you're really lacking the late games that the deck needs. And I feel like Camara should have been that super strong late game card that says, I want to be in Thrawn, I want to be the late game card for Thrawn, for them to have a super strong late game. And this card was meant to be the flagship for Thrawn. And because Camara is not good, I feel like Thrawn is not good because Camara is not good. If Camara was good, Thrawn would be so much better as a leader. As I said earlier, Thrawn as a leader is very good, but unfortunately the cards that he's attached to are not, and Camara is one of them. Camara, and also I had no choice. I felt those two cards should have been really strong staples in Thrawn, and unfortunately they're not, and that's a bit unfortunate. So yeah, what is the problem with Camara? It has no immediate impact on the game. You have to play him, and then you have to wait an entire turn and then attack with it. Name a card, and then hope that it discards, and the discard is not even that strong. It's simply just a very underwhelming card. It should have been so much stronger than this. How could they've been made it stronger? First of all, make it so his abilities an on attack and in play ability, so you get to play the card. It discards something right away, and then on play. So that would be a good starting point. And then from that, try to see if you can make it even better with other elements. But this would have been a good starting point to make his ability an on attack and on play, and then from there we can see. But big missed opportunity for the Camara, such an iconic ship as well. It would have been great to make this a lot more playable, and it would have made Thrawn Control a far better deck. And this is it. This is the entire list. So let me know in the comments below if there's any other card that you wish was better, that you wish was stronger, and anything that anywhere where you feel like it has been a missed opportunity by FFG to make the card stronger. Obviously, I'm not blaming FFG at all. Balancing so many cards is very difficult when you're working with a small team of testers and you have such a tight schedule to release all those awesome cards. And obviously, not every card needs to be great, and there's going to be some stinker. That's just the nature of things. There's always going to be some cards that are going to be stronger than others. But obviously, as I said, it's always fun to think about those things and to think about what could have been. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you like that kind of content, please like and subscribe, and let me know if you would like to see more of those kind of video, maybe more talking about the design aspect of the game rather than just the game itself. Thank you very much, and see you next time.